Whoops. Okay, I forgot how to turn it off. My bad. That should be better, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. Did you even hear anything that I was saying, or?
No, I didn't hear anything you were saying.
Oh yeah. No, basically, I was just saying like that. This is what the Ukraine people think of me anyway, so I might as well just ham it up. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, I get it. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Why?
had this program. And there's a lot of cool ones like Alien and shit, so I figured I'd just do that. Yeah. But anyways, we could talk now. So what you want to talk about?
Um, so I watched a bit of, well, most of it, the debate that you had on the panel with Dylan and Brianna and Anna. I joined in afterwards, but I think you left when I joined or before I joined.
Yeah, a little bit after you. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Yeah, I don't know. Why do you think people see you that way when it comes to Ukraine as like the devil and shit?
Well, I mean, no, I was just joking. I mean, obviously, most people don't actually, but like, it basically it's just any kind of like criticism of America's involvement, NATO's involvement of this, and any kind of like sympathizing at all with like Russia's position is just seen as like, well, you're just like an evil person supporting imperialism, and I just think that's an incredibly simplistic like view of this whole thing. You know what I mean? Like, I just think it's kind of silly.
Well, typically, rather than like doing like holistic moral statements about people, even though I might think that depending on what I'm hearing, is I usually just like to address the points themselves. So, um, because having listened through all this for the last year and a bit now, um, I never really was that interested in Marxist foreign policy anyway, or like far left foreign policy anyway. But right now, I feel like I'm completely done with it. I think it's kind of useless. I think most of the analysis they provide doesn't really get you anywhere. I don't think it provides any insight. I think it's like very full of logical inconsistencies and a lot of disinformation. So, yeah, I
And
don't
that
know.
and that includes mine, I assume, right? But
From what I remember, I watched watching the panel. There was like you and two other people talking. So I hope I haven't mixed you guys up. But yeah, I
well,
probably
yeah, there's
disagreed with
one
most of
other
what you were saying.
Marxist.
Yeah.
It was the ball guy was another the Marxist,
Hmm.
and then there was the ANCAP guy, which has nothing to do with Marxism. So
Yeah. Um, okay. Well, what do you? Just so I haven't mixed you up with other people on that panel, what would you say is like maybe a criticism that you think is like quite reasonable that people call you a Russia apologist for or whatever the fuck?
wait, what do you mean by that?
Are there like what's like a particular position you hold that you think is like quite sensible or quite strong, but you think people call you a Russia apologist for having it? Like,
Okay, well, yeah, here's an example. I mean, I understand why Russia felt the need to invade. Whether or not it's like morally justified or not, I feel that I understand why that they felt the need to. And it's because everything that's been going on in Ukraine, which by the way, I mean, as we all know, it neighbors right next to Russia, right? It's
mhm.
like literally a neighboring country, and all the support from NATO and the U.S. that has been given to Ukraine for like decades now. I could see that why that makes them feel like they're becoming cornered, and why they felt the need to act. So that's one, I think.
Okay. So I guess the idea there is when you talk about American support going to Ukraine, do you mean like mostly NATO or is it to do with the EU as well? Or is it like a main thing there or is it just kind of all of them?
Oh, I mean, oh yeah, all of them, really. I mean, especially when you add them all up, right? Like I think, well, the most obvious physical threat is obviously from NATO and all the military support that they've been getting uh, from them for many years now. But I mean, but when you add that to the EU also wanting to sort of creep into Ukraine and increase economic, I don't know, maybe some would say dependence on the West. I don't know if I'd say it like that, but like and you add that together, if you add all these different things together, it's like Russia they just kind of feel like cornered all of a sudden in a region that which they had used to have a lot more control over, obviously. And yeah, like I just see why they feel that.
Okay.
And like
But I
if you
guess
saw-
it's not
if you saw go ahead,
it's not
sorry.
like moral statements though. Like I guess you wouldn't say that Russia is entitled to have any say over what happens in Ukraine or Latvia, Lithuania, right? Just like It's just more the
No,
way things
no,
are to
no,
you.
no. I wouldn't say that they're entitled, but just simply that it is the way that it has been. Like,
Hmm.
and we know this, by the way, right?
Yeah.
Like, us in the West are very aware that Russia used to have, like, it used to be their like ballpark, this Eastern European area. So we should be taking. I feel like we should be taking that into consideration if we have any kind of like realistic foreign policy view at all,
Hmm.
rather than just like, well, we could just go in swinging dicks and this is ours now and expect no like sort of repercussions for it. You know what I mean?
Okay. So I guess we can maybe I generally maybe split it up from NATO and the EU. So as far as NATO goes, like when I've looked through this, even I think this surprises most people because you don't really hear it that much online. But I think most, in terms of like foreign policy experts, I think most liberal or idealist foreign policy people actually do tend to admit in their work that NATO expansion into Eastern Europe makes Russia angry. Like I don't think anyone like even if it was never promised, I don't think there was any formal promise to to not bring former Warsaw Pact and Soviet states into NATO. But it's still like it's clearly something that angers Russia. I think that's probably quite reasonable to say. The bit that I think is missing from that statement, though, is one, if you look at Russia's behavior from 1991 onwards, Russia doesn't need NATO to do anything before they start aggressing on other countries. In 92, they involved their troops in the Transnistria War. In 91 to 93, they got involved in the Georgian Civil War. In 94, they fought like a very fucking rough war with over Chechnya. So like Russia is willing to be aggressive even if NATO doesn't do anything, because the first round of NATO expansion was what, 99. So that's one
Yeah.
side, and the other side as well is that no one makes Eastern European countries want to join NATO more than Russia does. If you live in Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, like it's the fact that these people wanted to join NATO is because of Russia, right? They've had the brutal history of Russia encroaching on their territory and jailing people and installing regimes and annexing and all that shit. And then when they see Russia behaving the way that they have been with former Soviet territory, I think they kind of like being in NATO. They like being in a position where Russia can no longer fuck with them. And I guess if you talk about the other end, is that what Russia feels angry about it, then I guess like, yeah, they do. And their population is very obviously quite traumatized by a history of being invaded through Western Europe. But at the end of the day, we're in the nuclear age now. Russians can feel threatened by NATO, but at the end of the day, NATO can't do anything to Russia, like to Russia's actual sovereignty, right? NATO's never going to invade Russia.
Well,
So
yeah, no, yeah, I agree. Yeah, it doesn't have to though, because like, I mean, the fact of the matter is that countries, like any country, including Russia, like they don't just think in terms of what is happening right now. And what, and well, by the way, the argument that NATO is purely defensive, that's not completely true. It is mostly true. Like you are aware that they have attacked multiple different countries, right?
like Libya, Yugoslavia, yeah. But
Yeah, Yugoslavia, Libya. That well, they train people in Iraq and
yeah, but that doesn't,
Syria as well.
to me,
Yeah.
that doesn't take away from the fact that they're never going to attack Russia. They've never invaded a nuclear power because they can't.
Oh, yeah, they might not invade. They don't have to invade somebody in order to like to be aggressive towards them, though. Like in most of a lot of those countries we just mentioned, for example, like they didn't invade them really. They just like they'll make like a no-fly zone, for example,
Yeah, but they can't.
which
So
that's not an invasion, but
yeah, but they can't do a no. Well, I mean, I think they had boots in the ground, and they all like, but they can't do that to Russia either. I don't think they can bomb Moscow or like, uh, yeah.
no, no, and they probably won't. But I mean, but countries again, countries see things way down into the future. They don't just respond to things that are happening right now. They have to see things and perceive things that could happen years, even decades from now. And when a country sees like another military alliance sending billions of dollars of weapons to their like to their immediate neighboring country, I mean, you have to understand that they're not gonna like that, right? Like,
And
and
to
like here, I'll give you an example. I'll give you like let's flip the script here. Like, imagine that like there was like a Russia China like military alliance, and they were doing all this shit that we're doing to Ukraine to Mexico. How do you think America would react to that?
yeah, I think America might. Which probably, I mean, they did Bay of Pigs, right? They were quite aggressive, and I oppose that completely. They shouldn't have been because they
Yeah,
have no right to. It's not like it's nothing to do with, it's not their territory. I would
yeah.
also say that people of Mexico have a right to do whatever they want. I guess the reason maybe that Mexico isn't looking for a Chinese or Russian military alliance is because America hasn't attacked Mexico for quite a while right now, whereas Russia has very recently been involved in breaking off parts of other countries and making it part of Russia. So I can understand Eastern European countries, and I think they're completely justified to want a defensive alliance against, because to them that's what it is. If you're Latvia, NATO is a defensive alliance. It means Russia's never going to invade you, and I think they're right to want that. And I think actually
Yeah, no,
the absence of NATO is what made Ukraine like a target for being invaded.
yeah, no, and I do understand. I agree with you to the extent of those further, more periphery countries like Latvia, Estonia, all them like wanting to join NATO, and but that's different though, because like Russia pretty much just like allowed those to happen, without too much fuss, to my knowledge. And why, like, but and they basically put a line in the sand though on I think Ukraine and maybe one other country, like I don't remember which one it was, but like Ukraine and other country, because they're right next door to them. They put a line in the sand on those. They're like, okay, but we're not going to allow Ukraine to join NATO though, because it's literally right next door to us.
I don't know if that's
So like
entirely true. Like,
Ukraine is a bit different than all those other ones, I think.
I mean, like Latvia and Estonia are both bordered with Russia. They're both part
Mhm.
of NATO.
But
So,
yeah, but also they're way smaller. They're I feel like they're seen as less of a threat because of that. Maybe I don't know. Like they don't have the history of the Ukraine and the size and economic power of the Ukraine. You know what I mean? Either.
I don't think they're so their borders. Not. I mean, I guess being in NATO, they have more power than Ukraine, and being in the EU, they have more power than Ukraine. But I still don't think. I think the reason they didn't do anything in 2004-5 over Estonia and Latvia was probably because they didn't have the strength to at the time. I think they probably would have, but
Mm.
uh, that's the thing is like as far as Ukraine
Maybe.
goes, NATO wasn't even like the big reason, right? Like NATO was uh, the status for Ukraine and NATO was the same in 2014 as it was in 2008. They wanted a path to membership for NATO. They didn't get it. It was frozen, and nothing really changed ever since then. Even in 2014, majority of Ukrainians didn't want to join NATO. They wanted to align more with the EU. So, um,
Is
I
that true?
guess
Okay.
yeah. As far as I know, yeah.
It
Like or
must
at
have been. It
least
must have been pretty close though between the no's and the yeses. But I don't know.
Ukraine
Maybe.
polls. So I think in the East they were definitely against NATO in 2014. Um, It was, yeah, throughout 2014, it was before Crimea, it was 47 against 44. Yeah, so it was like some polls have like a 10-point lead.
Mm,
10 points,
yeah.
5 points, 3 points. Before 2014, it's like 60% against, 20% for. After Crimea, uh, and after the civil war in the Donbass, a lot of people people started to shift their opinions. But before 2014, it was like 60% of Ukraine was against
Mm,
NATO membership and 24. So yeah, like, um,
okay.
so again,
All
like
right.
that's because Russia made Ukraine want to join NATO. Basically, I think that's kind of undisputable, right? Right.
I mean, yeah, partly for sure, yeah, but also like, um, shit, I kind of forgot what I was gonna say. I mean, yeah, definitely Russia makes them want to, but I mean, does that mean that they should though? Like, is it a good idea? And I think that my argument there can be easily made by what's happening right now. You know what I mean? How many Ukrainians are dying now because of this? Because of that?
Well, it's not because of NATO, though,
Or
is
no,
it?
but
Because Ukraine wasn't
well, no,
advancing
well,
towards NATO
no,
at the
but
time.
to be clear, yes, obviously not joining NATO because they haven't joined NATO
Hmm.
yet, obviously. But like, here's the thing that most people from the West don't also seem to understand. Like, yes, while it is technically true that Ukraine isn't part of NATO, that's kind of just like a technicality at this point because they do everything they cooperate with NATO to such an extent that they're doing almost everything just short of joining NATO that they could possibly. Like you're aware that they have been getting all kinds of money, all kinds of weapons, been doing literal military exercises with NATO for years. Like I mean, what like what is Russia supposed to like say
So I
when they
think
look at
it's
that?
yeah, but I mean they're getting help from NATO countries because they have a country aggressing on them. Um, which again are like yeah, they've had like I think there's still like there's like friendship of NATO and all that stuff like that Ukraine does kind of have, but it's yeah, that's like NATO countries. But yeah, like the I guess the big difference is there's no Article 5. Like that's the that's why Russia was able to invade Ukraine because that wouldn't trigger Article 5.
Yeah, yeah, and that is big. That does matter. But like again, like when you look at all the cooperation that Ukraine has been having with NATO in like recent years, like I mean that's also probably like Russia probably looks at that not favorably as well
Well,
because they're getting training and I have read article I know this was a while ago but I had read articles a while ago that like they were doing military exercise NATO was doing military exercises with the Ukrainian military on Russia's borders. So like what is that like what is that supposed to signal like to Russia? You know what I mean?
yeah, again, but like I think NATO cooperation with Ukraine was mostly in 2014 onwards. This is like after Russia has aggressed on Ukraine. So, but again, I guess the problem is like, what are we going to say then? So when it comes to Ukraine's aspirations for joining NATO, even if 99% of them want to join, should it just be a no because we don't want to make Russia upset? Like, is that
Well, I mean, if Russia is saying what it did say before this war, and that like this is going to be a huge problem, we're drawing a line in the sand. Like, please do not do this. We should take that into consideration before we do it. No, otherwise, we would be putting the Ukrainian people at risk. Like I would argue that we did. Like, if you, yeah, sure, are you right? They could join or should be able to join NATO if they want to, but I mean, on the part of NATO accepting them, is it really responsible to accept them when their neighboring countries saying, like, basically, we're going to invade you if you do this? Like, I don't know,
well,
dude. That doesn't seem very responsible to
that
me.
wasn't what happened though. Like Russia annexed Crimea and started fomenting a civil war in the east because Ukraine, not because of NATO, but because Ukraine was siding with the EU over an economic trade deal. So I guess the question
Mhm.
is like you can say again. I think right at the beginning of the war, Zelensky offered to take NATO off the table, didn't he? In the middle of March, he said that he promised to try and make uh, Ukraine a neutral country with regards to NATO, and he offered to have negotiations over that. And then the response from Russia was like a week later. What did they do? They went to the UN and said Ukraine was developing bioweapons with the United States. So
Mhm.
I feel like if the problem was NATO, that could have been job done in like week 2 of the invasion, but it wasn't. Like Russia kept on pushing. So,
Yeah,
and I would imagine then the other because it's not just NATO. Like I guess we both covered that at the start. It's like it's also economic association with the EU, right? But
yeah.
then when you start adding these other things in, it's like, okay, how much sovereignty does Ukraine have to give up to keep Russia happy? And it seems to be they have to give up quite a lot. They have to give up their economic wishes. They have to give up apparently what kind of president they want to have, and they have to give up like military. So it's like how much of a puppet state does Ukraine have to be to make Russia
No, I
happy? And is
mean,
that like worth it? You know?
no, yeah, and yeah, I understand that, but like, well, like, okay, have you ever heard of the school of great power politics in international relations?
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, so apparently, I was just reading about this the other day. You ever heard of John Mearsheimer too?
Yep.
Yeah.
Familiar with them?
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, yeah, I was just reading about him and that the other day, and like, I mean, apparently that's like the school of thought that I like subscribe to, and I didn't even know it because I didn't hear about that specific school and what it was until very recently. So I don't know, it's kind of like a eureka moment. Like, yeah, okay, this is pretty much what I am. So like, basically, I don't know. I get if you want me to say it for like the audience, what it means, real quick.
Um, I've gone over it a lot of times, but yeah, you can go ahead. Sure.
Yeah. Oh, well, okay. So basically, great power politics means that like, uh, it's a school within the realism field school, by the way, of international relations, and what it basically it means is that there are these countries called that we call great powers, which they exert a sphere of influence over their surrounding areas. Some are bigger than others, by the way. I would argue that America has like is like the biggest has the biggest sphere of influence. But also there are other ones like Russia, which is another great power. Although their sphere of influence is smaller, they still have one over at least parts of Eastern Europe now. It used to be way bigger, obviously, with the USSR.
Mhm.
And so, like, yeah, so these great powers have a sphere of influence, and like it is unfortunate that those countries that are in their sphere of influence don't get as much sovereignty as they would like. But I mean, as it stands in the world currently, it's the only realistic way to see it because that's just kind of how it is. Like again, like imagine what if Russia was doing the same shit to like Mexico or something right next to us. Like honestly, I would argue that America would invade a country way further off in Latin America than Mexico if it ever joined like a military alliance with Russia or China. Like fucking somewhere in South America, we'd probably invade. I think that we demonstrated that we're that aggressive by our history. So like yeah, like it is it fair that like a lot of those countries that are in these great power spheres of influence don't get to get whatever everything that they want in terms of their sovereignty? Yes, it sucks, but it's just kind of the way that it is. And if you go against that, or if you ignore that rather, then you're putting a lot of those countries at risk of war
Does that
by
mean
just
that?
ignoring that this reality. And
So does
that's pretty much my position.
well, that's why I find it strange coming from a Marxist then, because in the Cold War, I mean, Mearsheimer had this position in the Cold War was that um, all those countries like Cuba or Chile or El Salvador, those were American sphere of influence. And the reason America was so aggressive with them was because they wanted to align more towards the Soviet Union, right? Or just to be independent socialist regimes. But is that just something that those countries had to do as well? Should Cuba have just accepted the Bay of Pigs? Should Chile have just accepted General Pinochet? Because that's just what great powers do.
Well, no, I mean they fought against obviously Cuba like won the Bay of Pigs. So
Yeah,
I
and they
mean
got a lot
they
of help
fought
from the
against them,
Soviets
and
afterwards as well, right? But like, I think if you're Cuba, like, it's probably a good thing, right?
no, well, no, and yeah, and I mean they fought against it. A lot of those countries, right? And
Hmm.
I say good on them for that. But and also Ukraine is fighting against Russia, sure. And but my main argument, I'm not saying that I don't understand why Ukraine is doing what they're doing. I understand why Ukraine is like wanting to resist Russian influence.
Hmm.
My argument is coming more from our side of things, like from the America and NATO side of things, like is it responsible for us to even like put them in this situation in the first place?
Well, I don't think we're
You know what I
putting
mean?
them in this situation. I think it seems to be the case that Russia was already fucking with Ukraine for quite a long time throughout the 90s and the 2000s. And I think what we did was we just responded to something that Ukraine seemed to want. And the problem, I guess, with just saying this is what great powers do, well, if we had that position in the 90s, well, then everywhere in former Soviet territory would be up for grabs, right? Russia would still have influence over the Baltics. They would still have influence over Romania, Bulgaria, Hungary. But thankfully, we said no to that. And now those countries are much better off for it. You can look at their economies compared to economies that stayed within the Russian customs union, the Eurasian customs union, and they are much better off. So, I guess that's the difference. And
Wait, you're talking about the countries that joined NATO early on, right?
yeah, in the 2000s, or even
Yeah.
like in 2009, I think there were a couple of countries added as well. But yeah, like those countries compared to the ones like Belarus or like Kazakhstan, yeah, they're much better off. So uh,
Well, but much better off than what though? Than their economies after we basically destroyed the entire U.S. like Soviet economy. It entirely fucking collapsed, largely because of our influence. Like, yeah, their economies are way better off than after we'd already destroyed them. Yes, I agree with that. Because like
well,
you're aware that like the massive like the economic collapse after the USSR and how it affected a lot of these countries, right? It was a terrible time to be
yeah,
alive
so
then,
like
right?
the IMF shock therapy, but then that's only part of the story, right? The other part of the story is that you had a massively like a centrally planned economy suddenly switching to free markets, where a lot of corrupt individuals from the former states were able to seize advantage of that, and like you're having to convert an economy in a way that's never really been done before at that scale. So, I mean, Yeah, but I guess the fact is that the
Yeah, yeah,
countries
it was
that
awful, right?
but now that
I mean,
now the countries that stayed with that are aligned with the EU, like the Baltics, do a lot better than the ones that stay aligned with Russia, like Kazakhstan and Belarus. So, yeah, and it's actually I think it's good that throughout the 90s we said, yeah, that maybe was Soviet sphere of influence, but it's not anymore. And then they don't want to be, and they shouldn't have to be. But I guess that's the problem is that like, and by the same token, that I would say if Chile were to appeal to a foreign power for help when we were helping like put Pinochet in there, um, I think they'd have been right to want that. And people in America would have been right to try and keep America out of that situation. By the same token, I think Ukrainians should probably not give up their economic sovereignty and their democratic sovereignty just for keeping Russia happy either. Because at the end of the day, they're going to fight against that with or without our help. It's just that without our help, the result is that Ukraine gets completely rolled by
no,
Russia.
well, would they though? I don't see. I don't know about that one because, I mean, would they have felt as emboldened to fight this war if they had not been getting like billions of dollars of money and weapons from us? Like,
Maybe not as emboldened,
I
but
don't know.
like what happens when Ukrainians surrender? They get buried in mass graves, right? Like look at the Ukrainian towns in the east that surrendered. The Russians came in and they just murdered civilians and put them in mass graves. They did that in Bucha, they did that in Izium. So yeah, occupying a country that really doesn't like you is pretty difficult. And actually, even one person who was very aware of this was Mearsheimer. Mearsheimer said that Russia was a threat to Ukraine in the early 90s. He actually said that Ukraine should keep their nuclear weapons because of that. Um, so
I
yeah,
mean, yeah,
no,
they probably. I
it
think
would
they probably should have, right?
it might
But
just be
like,
it might just become another Afghanistan. You know, it could just be like 10 years of Russia occupying Ukraine and just like I guess holding the place, but struggling with armed militias and shit like that. So yeah, I don't know. I think the problem is that as far as European security goes, and as far as Western security goes, is because you know, as like Europe is a great power and America's a great power. As far as our security goes, we're just maybe a bit fed up of Russia like aggressing on European countries, which or even countries in the Caucasus. So like that kind of goes both ways with the great
I
power
mean,
thing.
yeah, yeah, the Eastern European countries specifically that were once part of the USSR, sure, but they're not attacking Germany or France anytime soon. Like,
No, but
I mean,
these are economic partners, and there's like immigration that happens between the two countries, especially part of the EU, right? Like there's like free movement between these nations. Yeah, we're part of the same like we're part of some kind of union.
yeah, yeah, now we are, sure.
So I guess that's the problem is like I even the way you're wording some of the stuff you're saying is you keep saying like what we're doing to Ukraine is like, as far as what we're doing like if you look at before 2014 Ukraine wanted to side with the EU but Russia's president, the Russian puppet president Yanukovych, went the other way, and then they were really angry about that. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I hear that very often about him. But is that necessarily true that he was just a puppet though? Because I mean, I haven't done that much research on Yanukovych specifically, so
well,
I have also read some people say about him that he was much more neutral towards like Russia and Russia and America, by the way, which I would argue that's probably my more so my ideal with a country like Ukraine is just try as best as possible to remain neutral between these two great powers that are like doing a tug of war with you. But I'm not sure if that's true about him though. So I don't know if you have more information on him,
yeah.
you could tell
So
me.
before, like, by 2013, and this is from Mearsheimer's lecture as well. He shows a graph. It's like the EU deal was like it was more popular everywhere in Ukraine, even in the east. In the east, it was like it was lower. It was like 30-20, but it was still no one wanted to side with Russia economically at that point. It was by far the less popular choice in like all of Ukraine, apart from maybe Crimea. But
Mm.
Yanukovych, after 300 plus people had voted for the EU deal, Yanukovych had a couple of meetings with Putin and then he blocked it. He blocked like 6 laws that would have allowed the EU deal to go through. He imprisoned one of his political opponents, Timoshenko, and then he signed a deal with Putin that no one wanted. And then that's where the kind of Maidan protest got kicked off from. So,
Mm.
yeah, he did play a neutral act economically with Ukraine and the EU for a while, but that's not why they overthrew him. They overthrew him because he sided with Russia after having meetings with Putin. So, I guess that's the
Well, no, they overthrew him because they were having massive like protests, and then his police force shot some people.
yeah, yeah.
But
That
but
was
those
that.
but
So
those
that
people were
escalated,
also
but
taking over government buildings too.
yeah, but those
Which
protests started because of that deal, and then because
yeah.
he went against the will of the people, and then yeah, he ordered his police to shoot some people to shoot people, and then yeah, after you've got like 100 dead bodies on your hands, then yeah, I think in a situation like that, and when you're basically trying to ban protesting to the point where people get immunity if they kill protesters, which was one of his anti-protest laws. Yeah, if you're at that point, then I think it's probably okay to like overthrow you. Yeah.
Well, but also, I mean, besides all that, but like, why? I want to know why did he make that decision to block their entry into the EU? Like, what were there actual like good reasons behind it? Like,
Well, Russia was
was
threatening
there?
economic coercion. Russia put sanctions on
Yeah.
Ukrainian imports, and Putin. I think one person even said that they might not like if this deal goes through, we might not be able to respect Ukraine's sovereignty as a state. That was one quote that came from a Putin advisor. Yeah, but he did it because he was a puppet. Yeah, he was like notoriously corrupt. Yeah.
See, that's what I was thinking of. Like, would there have been some like large negative consequences for them joining the EU? And if so, like, is it understandable that he made that decision? Like, would their economy have just fucking crashed overnight if they did that? Like, I
As
don't know,
opposed to, I
dude.
mean, if he knew some, if there's any evidence that this is what happens to countries that do deals with the EU, I don't even think it was joining the EU; it was just doing a deal. But I mean, compared to
Mm.
the deal that he did take from Russia, where the terms weren't even written down, they were verbal. Like no one knew what Russia wanted in exchange. That was kept secret. Um, so yeah, I don't know. I think and the fact that Russia was basically saying that you can't do any more like trade deals with the EU in the future, then yeah, I don't know. I think yeah, I think he accepted that deal because he was ultimately a puppet. Yeah.
I mean, maybe he was a puppet, or maybe he just made a decision that he felt was in the best interest of his people at that time. Like,
Yeah,
I don't know.
which again is subverting
When
democracy
people,
in one way or the other,
I
right?
don't know.
Because the parliament voted for the EU deal by like 320 votes. So yeah, I mean, if he thinks it's the best thing for them, he can believe that all he wants, right? That's still a very authoritarian decision to take. It's against the majority of polling, and it was against the majority of elected representatives by far. So
Well, but I mean, Ukraine's an incredibly corrupt, kind of non-functionally democratically country, and it's been like that for a while. So, like, what do you expect? Like,
yeah, exactly. But the problem
he
is
had
like
that power, so he just decided to use it, I guess.
yeah, of
Like,
course, yeah. But but then I think Ukrainians are perfectly in their within their rights to not want anything to do with that, right?
yeah, no, yeah, absolutely, yeah, they have the right to not like it, sure, but yeah, but like when people use the term puppet on people like him, like to me like that I just man I need to get some research on that then because like people like to throw terms like that around like and without like much of a basis, you know what I mean? Like, so I would need to do more research on Yanukovych to say whether or not he was actually a puppet, or is that just like a line that has been like promoted by like the Western media since then in order to discredit him and to discredit that entire line of thinking of neutrality, or I guess if you want to say just corruption, you'd probably say put it that way.
I
Like,
mean,
I don't know. Was he? I don't know.
so he made that deal with Russia after a secret meeting with Putin. The terms that Putin wanted in exchange were not made public. When he fled after February, when the buildings were being occupied, he fled to Russia. And he's been in exile in Russia since 2014. When he left, the Ukrainian parliament, I think like 320 people voted to impeach him and to get rid of him. So, uh,
Mm.
sounds
Yeah.
very puppet-ish behavior. Yeah,
No, I
I mean,
mean,
he
no,
was voted in at
yeah.
one point, but yeah, it sounds very puppet-like behavior. Yeah, I mean, he lost like his credibility plummeted like faster than just about any leader in like ever. So yeah,
Well, yeah, no, and it might be completely true. Honestly, you might just be right about him just being a puppet, and that will go right along with my the sort of great power politics thesis of like, yeah, these great powers like Russia, America, etc., have their spheres of influence, and they want to control them. And but again, that's a reality that you just have to keep bumping up against, and you can't just ignore it when you're like dealing with countries like this. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and then
You can't just go in guns blazing and expect it to go well. You
also
know what I mean?
I guess the choice was Ukraine either makes Russia very very angry, or they just remain Russia's bitch until the ends of time. They chose the former. But now that we
Mhm.
are where we are, what should we do now?
What should we do now with Ukraine? You mean?
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, like I'm not sure. Like I said in the debate, like I expect us to keep giving them like money and weapons and stuff, and
Mm.
then I mean I kind of understand it because now we've already we made the commitment, which I think was folly in the first place. I think we shouldn't have been giving them all these weapons and stuff, and thereby I would argue destabilizing the region in the first place. But I mean, fuck, we did. So I don't know. I mean, if I was in control, I would do also like I mentioned in the debate. I would probably just try to like end the conflict by some kind of peaceful resolution, by like sort of drawing down all of our arms sales to Ukraine and like trying to hammer out some kind of a peace deal. You know, because the damage is already done, so we could try to mitigate it in the future. But I don't think that's going to happen at all. We're just going to keep selling weapons and to Ukraine, like because that's what we do. That's what makes all of our arms salesmen money. Like they like that. We like our Congress people like their buddies in the defense industry making money. So we're just going to keep doing that until I don't know. The idea is that we want to Ukraine to kick Russia out completely of their country, right? And they're probably
Hmm.
going to keep trying to do it until then. But here's the problem, though. Like our commitment to Ukraine probably is not going to last forever. Like we've proven in American history time and time again that like our support of a country like Ukraine is not infinite. It'll end eventually.
Hmm.
Literally, all it would take is just one different president. Like if Trump gets in, for example, and he says, you know, we're done with this Ukraine shit, then we stop giving them weapons and money, and then they're just fucked. So
Yeah.
like, what happens then?
Yeah. I hope
I
that
just
doesn't.
don't see our support of Ukraine going into perpetuity. I just don't, because it almost never does.
I mean, as far as I know, the war's been going on for a year. Lend lease lasted 4 years. So
Yeah.
I don't know. And Ukraine's already gained half of what they lost since 2022. There's another offensive starting. Russia is having a pretty rough diminishing return with their gear. There were in the winter. There were soldiers having to buy their own thermals. They're having to go back further and further with their tanks from the 1960s and the 50s. They're having to order like hundreds of thousands of washing machines from Kazakhstan because they need to strip them for the chips to put in their missiles.
Hmm.
That's a pretty rough situation for them. But I mean, like, I guess there are a couple of things you said. Like, one was destabilizing the region with Western arms. I mean, it's like, I feel like the destabilization was already done when Russia took Crimea and there was a civil war in the Donbass. Um,
Well,
so
but there was shit that was going on before that, though. That was in like the beginning of everything. Like we were already selling weapons to very suspect fucking militias and shit in Ukraine before that, like
before
Azov and
2014,
right sector. I think
I thought
so.
the arming happened after 2014.
No. I read. Wait, 2014 was that when Euromaidan
It was
was? Is that right?
Crimea, annexation of Crimea.
Oh wait. When was the Euromaidan again?
Just at the
I don't
end of
remember.
2013, beginning of 2014, and then Crimea was just
Oh, it
after.
was.
Yeah, I
Oh
don't
yeah.
think we
So
were arming
it was right
Ukrainians all that much before 2013 or 2014. No.
Well, no, and I had read that we were arming certain militia groups, and that are actually by the way, our media back then they were very critical of it,
Yeah, that was
but
20.
since the start of the war, now they did it 180, which
Yeah,
is
that was
interesting.
2014, 2015, wasn't it? Let me find it. I think yeah, there's I'm pretty sure there was like a Jacobin article. Yeah, this is like there's an article from Jacobin here. Authorities in Ukraine have failed to prevent and punish violence by far right groups, grown sadly since 2015. Yeah, this was 2015, where
Hmm.
14, 15. So this was afterwards. Yeah.
Well, no, I mean, there was an article I read a while ago. I had to look it up again, but there's an article that said that like we had been providing weapons to militias that like either right before or even during the Euromaidan thing to like certain militia groups, and that's why they were able to even like be taking over government buildings and stuff during that thing. But like
That's
if that's true, then I mean that's what I'm talking about.
I
Like
mean
that's
that's a
us us
fairly
us giving weapons to sus militia groups
I mean
to
that's
like and destabilizing the region. Go
that's a
ahead.
fairly new claim, but again, like as for destabilizing, like it wasn't just right sector who were involved in the Maidan revolution. There was like almost 1 million people on the streets in Kiev when that happened, and
Oh yeah,
when
no.
people were saying when people were rejecting Yanukovych's deal, that entire crowd applauded because so it wasn't just like militia. Yeah, this was a pretty majority consensus at the time, like on the streets. So yeah, I don't really know how much American arms had to do with that. It seemed like the Ukrainians were. What wasn't this when they were just
Yeah,
using like
I don't really care about the
homemade
people
fucking
applauding in the
shields?
streets
And yeah,
thing.
but like,
Like that
but
that
wasn't
just
this
sounds to me like some, oh, look at the Arabs are dancing in the streets after 9/11. Like, okay, how many really were like that just seems like some, I don't know, some nothing to me. But
well,
anyways, go what were you
yeah,
saying?
but like in the Maidan, like yeah, like the majority of the protesters were still they were open to they approved when Yanukovych's deal was rejected. But even then, like that's when you wonder about like how much Western influence there was. Even at the time when Yanukovych was trying to do like a more constitutional or more safe transition of power, the Americans at the time were supporting that. Like even Victoria Nuland was saying that I hope the Ukrainians accept this deal and they hold elections. It was the protesters on the streets who said no to that. So I don't really know how much influence the West had over that particular position. But like as far as destabilization goes, like, well, yeah, that after that happened, there was a civil war, um, and there was an annexation. So you're taking like annexation of Crimea, civil war in the Donbass with Russian military personnel in the region. You've got Yanukovych getting his police officers to fire on protesters. I feel like that's a lot more concrete instances of destabilization from one end compared to the other.
Sure.
But as far as going from now and like a peaceful resolution, uh, what does that look like? Because to me, peaceful resolution looks like um, we're going to give you some territory, and Ukraine stays neutral, i.e., no guarantee of safety against this happening again. And what stops Russia from using that time to violate a peace agreement and just come in again in 5, 10 years?
I mean, yeah, or we could add certain assurances that we will intervene if they do decide to invade again, you know, as a sort of teeth in it.
Like
We could do something like that.
the same thing that NATO kind of says.
Yeah, yeah, basically, but yeah, probably not. You probably don't want them to join NATO. I don't know, but like maybe something short of that, where yeah, again, we give them some kind of assurances that we would intervene. Yeah, I don't know. Honestly, I feel like Ukraine, they probably should have never gotten rid of their nukes. That was kind of a dumb decision, though, wasn't it?
Well,
Why
they
they?
would have been the third largest nuclear power in the world as a newly formed country full of like you say like corrupt ex-Soviet officials. I don't know. I think the whole point of nuclear
Mm.
non-proliferation is kind of being like, first of all, they have this massive, like the third biggest nuclear arsenal in the world that they can barely use in the hands of who the fuck knows. I guess the whole point of like the more countries that have nukes is like the more chances there are of one psycho getting his hands on them. So I don't know. Probably at the time, maybe in hindsight, but at the time, it probably wasn't a good idea to have
Yeah,
ex-Soviet like these brand new countries having nukes. Especially now, because if Ukraine had nukes, then that would be what like Russia has a nuclear power that opposes it on its doorstep, and how much would that threaten Russia's security or sphere of influence? Right? We don't have. I don't think we have nukes directly pointed at Russia. I think Turkey has nukes, but we don't have nukes in like the Baltics or yeah. So
yeah. Well, I mean, well, our nukes. I mean, don't they just have like? Are they just completely intercontinental? Like we could just send them anywhere at this point. Like
yeah,
I
which
don't.
is why NATO doesn't shouldn't really be that much of an extra threat to Russia, right? Because if it's going to like a war with Russia is a nuclear war, and we can fire nukes from wherever. Like we
Yeah.
got submarines that no one else in the world can detect, and they just come up and fire. Yeah.
Yeah, no. Well, I mean, yeah, like I don't know. I just don't think, Ukraine joining NATO as part of a peace solution would be viable for obvious reasons. Because like, At least I would. I don't know if maybe you don't agree, but I would agree that's a large part of the reason for this whole conflict. But like, I mean, basically just give them some sort of security assurance. I mean, I don't know. I'm not like a diplomacy expert or anything. I can't really answer that one for you. I'd have to do more research on that one. So yeah, I can't really completely flesh that one out for you. What exactly that would look like. But I'm sure there are other sources that you could look to. Maybe people in government or academics that have like wrote about this that you can look up. But I'm not that. I don't know. I'm just not that expert. You know.
Yeah, I mean, well, neither am I. Like when I say what should happen, it's just like I am just a layperson making my claims. But like, I mean, as far
Yeah.
as security assurances for Ukraine, we had the Budapest Memorandum in 1994, where we said like America, Ukraine, Russia's like allies signed a deal saying that they would respect Ukraine's sovereignty. Russia broke it, and America upheld their end and defended Ukraine. So it's like
Mm.
we've had deals like this in the past. Russia knew that America would probably help Ukraine. Maybe they didn't expect it to be that much, but yeah, like we've
Mm.
had deals like this in the past, and Russia broke them, knowing full well that Ukraine might have had help coming in from the West. So uh,
Well,
I guess
yeah,
that's
yeah. But like, I don't know. But did Russia make the that agreement under different conditions? Also, that were broken though. Like, was it stated that like they won't make a move to join NATO or anything like that? And
as far
like, I
as
don't know.
I
I'd have to know more about that.
no, I don't think anyone's ever promised that these countries wouldn't join NATO.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, the NATO literally didn't they make promises that basically Ukraine will eventually join NATO? They just never stated exactly when. Like,
Yeah, they said that in
yeah.
2008, but that was at the end of a summit where they rejected Ukraine's request to have a path to membership. Ukraine wanted to
Mm,
be put on a NATO accession path, but they were denied that because they weren't ready. They didn't have they couldn't meet the requirements.
mm.
So
Yeah, okay.
yeah, I don't know. Like again, I'm not asking you to be like a foreign policy expert, but at least like based on the information we do have, like I'm like I can basically just say like my position is that Ukraine is gaining back uh, a lot more than probably anyone expected them to last year. Um,
Mm.
and those arms are clearly working. Russia is clearly getting more and more desperate and more fucked. So I think it seems to be a good idea to just keep on taking back what they can. Eventually, hopefully, Ukraine gets all of everything that they lost since last year, and then all that's left is Crimea. And then I guess it would just depend on assessments at the time, right? Like maybe there might have to be some negotiation done about Crimea, or maybe Ukraine does have the strength to go and take that back as well. But that's more like one step at a time kind of thing. Because I feel
Yeah,
like
maybe.
stopping now is just a very, um, it's just a very thinly veiled way of saying, okay, nice try, Russia. You can try again in 5 years and build up your arms in the meantime, which is a bit worrying to me. I think when people say anti-war and take that anti-war position, they're not really considering. Uh, it may seem like anti-war today, but they're not really considering what that might look like in 5 years. Because it seems to me that it would be like a perfect opportunity for Russia to lick their wounds and just start again when they have more military strength.
Sure, yeah. But I mean, but also the problem is like you say that you think we should keep giving this money and support and weapons to Ukraine, but that doesn't mean that that's what our government is going to think like 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now, right? Like they might completely do a 180, and we do this shit all the time. Like
Yeah, they might,
we
but
might get a new president, and we'll stop. The gravy train to Ukraine ends, and then what happens then? They get even more fucked. Like
I mean, they
that's the
might,
problem
but
with this
like
whole.
yeah, they might do that. But then I guess my position is again, like obviously they shouldn't do that. And also, I don't see why. I guess the position is maybe like, we should stop arming Ukraine now, just in case another president decides to stop arming them in the future. That doesn't really make sense to me.
Well, no, I know I wasn't saying. Well, okay, I guess I did earlier say that we should do that, but it was because attached to like some kind of peace agreement, which I haven't fleshed out. So yeah, I'm not gonna yeah I'll drop that
Mm.
one. I'm because yeah I'm just again I would need to do more research on that. But yeah I don't know. So I'll just leave it at like and I don't know if you remember what shit what's his name non-smoker. He was the bald guy who was the other Marxist on that
Yeah.
panel. Do you remember what he said? He was basically saying what I am echoing from him, that about the whole like the Ukraine gravy train thing and it being unsustainable. Probably it's like I don't know. I just don't see it keeping on forever. You know what I mean? And
Maybe not, but like again,
that'll be probably the most determined, like most determinant factor of how this war ends up is, will America be willing to keep on giving the same amount of money and support to Ukraine or not?
well, as far as I
And that's
know,
kind of a shaky foundation.
as
You
far
know
as
what
I
I mean?
know, the United States still has a defense budget, and that's where the money's been coming from. So I don't know if the defense budget's going to like disappear or massively shrink in the next couple of years for whatever reason. But like again, we armed, well, not we, the United States armed a much bigger military in the Second World War with Lend Lease, and that was like 4 years of arming. So if
Hmm.
Ukraine's taken 1 year to get back half of what they lost in since 2022, um, yeah, I'm not too worried about like the gravy train running out. Like America's got a defense budget and they're using it. So, and it seems to be that I think was it the last. I think it was like the last round of support for Ukraine from the American defense budget was what, like 80 votes in Congress, or it was very bipartisan anyway. So yeah,
Yeah, no, yeah, it was proposed by Republicans actually, that it was called the Ukraine fatigue bill. I don't know if you've heard of that one.
I've heard a
But
little
yeah,
bit, but not,
I
yeah.
don't, yeah, I don't think it went anywhere though. So
Hmm.
yeah, well, I don't know. We'll have to see how it goes really.
Oh yeah, this was from Matt Gates, wasn't it?
Is that true by the wait, go ahead, sorry.
Apparently, it was from Matt Gates that.
Yeah, oh
Yeah,
yeah.
I don't think that. Yeah, or Bobert. Yeah, didn't seem like it was very popular. What were you saying?
Hmm. Yeah, but like, is that actually true that they've taken back half of their territory already
I think it was just over
from Russia?
half since 2022. That doesn't include
Hmm.
Crimea, but yeah.
Hmm.
And I think the summer counteroffensive is just starting right now.
Hmm. Okay. I mean, well, it's. I mean, yeah. If that's true, then yeah, it might be easier than I am thinking for them to take back their territory. But
Mhm.
yeah, we'll have to see. I mean, well, will Russia just double down and start, taking it more seriously, send more forces over there? Like, I don't know.
I mean,
That could also be a thing.
they do keep on, and they've increased their conscription age. I think it's like 65 now or some crazy shit. So yeah, they'll probably conscript more people. But then the problem there is, I guess, is like you're conscripting people who are less willing, who are weaker, who are older. Um, they've already had to send like drill instructors over to fight, which means that it's like a lower quality of drill instructor who's training the new people. So it's all like a diminishing return, right? Their best
Hmm.
equipment is basically gone, and now it's like these like tanks from the 1960s and shit. So that's definitely one gravy train that's running out. And like the fact that they
Yeah.
need to buy a washing machine just to get the chip out of it to put into their missiles, that can't be too cheap. Yeah.
Yeah. Probably. Yeah. So I mean, I don't know. Was there any other like points that you wanted to bring up or questions or?
Um, I think I'm good. Uh,
Hmm.
we didn't really go through the conspiracy stuff, which is probably quite refreshing because that's usually where it goes. Yeah. Um,
No, like what conspiracy stuff do you mean?
the idea that America orchestrated the Maidan Revolution, that kind of stuff.
Well, no, yeah, that one's I'm not sure about. I mean, there might be something to that because, yeah, like again, we had a lot of influence um on during that thing, and again, I have this was a long time ago though, so but I have read articles that we were giving money and guns to like certain militias even back then, which I mean, again, they used them to take over buildings, like government buildings in like during that whole coup. So like I don't know, there might be something to that, but I'm not studied enough on that to say for sure if that's true. But I don't know.
Ye-
I think there probably was at least some influence by us there because I mean, like I mentioned this in the debate as well. Like we've been interested in that region literally ever since the fall of the USSR. We've been interested in Eastern Europe and bringing it into our sway. And I would argue, in fact, that we helped cause the collapse of the USSR in the first place. So like it's not like we haven't been throwing in there for a long time. I don't think it's too far fetched to say that we had a lot of influence on those events. You know what I mean?
Again, I'm almost 100% sure that the arms went to them after Russia took Crimea.
Mm.
But yeah, I mean, like, I guess there's been involvement with things um, like promotion of democracy and like promote and like funding civil service, but that's all been very transparent. So I feel like
Yeah.
it's not like NED aren't what they used to be. You know, like their funding is quite transparent, and there are usually receipts for everything that they give money to now, or for like promotion of free press, or like just like simple things. Like if you've got a new country, they maybe don't have the resources to hold elections fairly. So just like things like that. But I don't really
Mm.
know. As far as I know, the money seems to be quite. The number seems to be quite low. I think as far as the whole Newland thing, I think it was what $5 billion over since 1991, which is like not that much money for a space of what 13, 14 years. And you know, some of it was for like
Mm.
helping the police crack down on human trafficking and shit like that. It's like I don't really know where like what part of these budgets is going towards fomenting a revolution, but I don't know. It's, unless something new comes out, it seems to be that the
Yeah.
Ukrainians kind of did that by themselves.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and there was another pretty like stark example that even Dylan Burns admitted when we were in the debate. Did you hear when when he mentioned the fact that, and I had read about this before the debate as well, that like during the, I think it was the 1950s, that we basically, the CIA sent like, I think it was like something around 50 to 100 agents into the USSR, um to like basically destabilize them. So like even during the Soviet Union, we were fucking with this whole region. I think that was in Ukraine actually, specifically too. That we basically sent hired saboteurs in Ukraine during the USSR to like just like start a bunch of shit. So like we've always been interested in this region. Like especially I think actually mostly since the Russian Revolution in 1917, because I mean America has always hated communism and Marxism, so we've had it out for them ever since then. So like, I don't know. I'm willing to go on a limb and say that we have had some influence on this region, even during like the Euromaidan and maybe even before. So
Yeah, but I just feel like if I was going to make that claim, I'd actually want to see like the evidence, you know, because as far as the CIA, yeah, of course, the CIA overthrew governments. We did it like in Iran in the 50s, but
yeah.
they also were quite open about it. They bragged about it at the time. Chile wasn't really a secret either. Kissinger publicly said that he wanted to stop that country from going towards socialism. So I think maybe there's the problem there where like people kind of apply a very Cold War lens to the present day, whereas it seems to be the case that in the present day, America tends to operate usually within soft power. We've had
Mm,
exceptions. Iraq was a fucking disaster. Um,
mm,
but as far as Ukraine goes, I don't really see any analog there. No.
mm. I mean, yeah, fair enough. Yeah, no, I would have to like relook up those articles and other ones in order to say that one with any confidence. So yeah, sure. You're right. You got me there for now. All right. So, but yeah, I don't know. Is there anything else that you wanted to bring up?
Um, no. Anything on your end?
No, not really. So like, well, I don't know. What is your ideology?
Kind of like a DemSoc, like mostly advocate for social
Oh,
democratic policies, kind of reform stuff.
okay. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't. Yeah, I mean, I'm basically just a regular old-fashioned Marxist. So,
There's not that
I,
many
I
of you
do I
guys
do
left
like
these
lean
days, is
toward.
there?
I'm sorry. Wait, what? I'm
So
sorry.
there's not that many of you guys left these days, are there?
No, not too much. I mean, there's a lot on Twitter that they aren't actually, because they don't know what the fuck they're talking about, and then they never read anything about it. So,
Oof.
but like, no, yeah, no, like I do lean towards or sympathize with Marxist-Leninism a lot of the time, but I don't call myself that because I wouldn't say that I've read enough Lenin to like. I would just feel dishonest because I haven't read that much of him. So I just call myself a Marxist basically. So yeah.
Okay.
And like, yeah, I'm not like, I'm sure you gathered through this conversation, like, I'm not like a fucking Russia simp here or anything, right? Like, I don't
No.
simp for Russia or anything, like, what like a lot of people accuse me of doing. It's just that I think that like this whole conflict it stems from geopolitical causes that are much more complex than, simply one country being evil and the other country being good. Like, that's just not how fucking foreign policy or geopolitics works. There are no good guy countries, right? There's just countries with competing interests with each other, and unfortunately, my here's my basic position on Ukraine right now. It's in a very unfortunate, awkward position of being in a state of tug of war between two um, imperialist powers, which is to say Russia on the one hand, and then America and NATO on the other hand. And it's just a really shitty position for them to be in. Um, so I don't know. My ideal prescription would be for them to try to remain neutral as much as they can, but I understand that that's very difficult to do. It's kind of a difficult like balancing act for them to do. So I mean, but yeah, so I mean that's all I have to say on that one. So
Out of interest, you can tell me if you think this analogy is wrong, because I tend not to do it. But if okay, if we're in World War II and someone said, I'm not like a Nazi simp or whatever. I just want to say, like, there are no good guys in this conflict. It's a complex geopolitical balance of power. And really, what's happening is that it's more just like a conflict between two imperialist powers, Nazi Germany on one side and the Allies on the other. What would you say there? You can
well,
tell me
no,
if
no,
that's a bad analogy if you want, but we can, yeah.
well, no, I mean, yeah, I think it isn't. Yeah, it isn't a one-to-one analogy. It's not. Yeah, it's not apples to apples. I think, because I mean, yeah, Nazi Germany was invading a lot more, like a Nazi, and maybe I don't know, maybe Russia will start invading more, but we're not to the point where they're invading and conquering nearly as much territory as Nazi Germany was, and they didn't have a. I mean, so yeah, some people call Russia and Putin fascist, but they're not, all right? Or at least they're definitely not fascist on the level of Nazi Germany and what the horrible things that they were saying about like entire like ethnic groups and that they want them to get rid of them basically. So I don't think Nazi Germany and Russia are a one-to-one comparison at all, really. But yeah, I'm sorry. What was the second part of your question?
Well, yeah, like the idea that this is okay, there's a few things I want to pick up there as well. But yeah, I mean, well, first of all, what we said, like, I mean, yeah, the Allies declared war on Hitler after he annexed what Austria and the Sudetenland, and then he invaded Poland. Russia annexed Crimea and then invaded Ukraine. So that's maybe one thing. It's like there's a slightly smaller landmass involved, but Ukraine's a pretty big country. And you could definitely say the Allies were imperialist powers as well. But also, like, I'm interested to know how is, again, like, not all fascists are Nazi, but how would you say Russia's not a fascist state right now? What's not fascist about Russia's regime right now?
Well, I mean, are they okay? So, well, first off, we should probably just define fascism real quickly first, right?
Okay.
So what does fascism mean to you?
To me, okay, I see it as like a constellation of ultra nationalism, of probably a degree of like like extreme social conservatism with regards to like LGBT and stuff like that. I would say authoritarianism, like one person rule and all that. I would say probably usually very strongman based language. Probably a lot of dehumanization of groups that you don't like, imperialist ambitions. Yeah, that kind of thing.
Well, no, I mean, yeah, to my knowledge about fascism, it mostly has to do with like, yeah, establishing sort of dictatorships or in the very least authoritarian control over society, and having to do with basically incredibly racist and xenophobic ideologies, which uh, like paint entire groups of minorities as the others, which basically we need to do something about these minorities. I mean, are they doing all that? Like, are they putting anybody in like concentration camps like Nazi Germany did in Russia? Like, I don't.
Um,
I think that's jumping the gun a bit.
there are Tatar like there are Tatars who are political prisoners, and some Tatar activists have been found like with their eyes gouged out by pro-Russian militias. I think there are people currently fighting from the Chechen forces in Ukraine right now who had been putting gay people in concentration camps. Uh,
But in Chechnya, you said?
yeah, but like on
Where?
Russia's side.
Mm. Putting gay people in camps. All right. I mean, I had to look that one up. Um,
And
uh,
I think that would have been when Putin was either prime minister or president. They've got like a bunch of kill lists for Ukrainians that they don't like. I think Anna was one of them. I think she's on a kill list. Um, I'm pretty sure the
Mm.
language that they use for Ukrainians tends to be like dehumanizing, right? They don't think Ukraine is a real country. It's not a real national identity. They're baby Russians, basically. It's like how Putin sees it.
Mhm.
So yeah, again, like not quite Nazi, but I feel like it's pretty close.
Well, but yeah, but about the crackdown, the anti-gay crackdown in Chechnya. But why is it just in Chechnya though? Like not in other parts of
I
Russia?
think it was during the war, but I think as far as the rest of Russia, I think Putin has described trans people as a crime against humanity, like their existence.
Wait,
I
wait,
don't think they
Putin said
put.
this? I'm sorry, who?
Yeah, Putin said that. Yeah.
Oh,
As
oh.
far as gay
Well,
people,
I mean, the fact I don't know the fact that it's in Chechnya that leads me to believe that it's like a more local thing, like because I mean I'm sure you're aware that Chechnya is it's largely Muslim, right?
mhm.
So like I'm sure that it's like I don't know. That leads me to believe that it's more of like local people wanting to
Yeah,
do this.
but it was the people who were aligned with Putin, right? It was the people who were aligned with Russia who did it.
Hmm. Okay. I mean, yeah. Well, yeah. That's fucked up if that's happening. Yeah. I'm not gonna fucking not condemn that one. But like, yeah. But again, like, I don't know. Fascism, though, going back, is like, yeah, it has to do with far right, authoritarian, ultranationalist political ideology and
Mhm.
movement characterized by a dictatorial leader.
Yeah.
Well, okay, I mean, but Putin, people call Putin a dictator, but I don't think like Russia is still democratic, but he's not open about being a dictator. Let's put it that way. Like he claims that they're in the very least that they still have democratic elections, although they may be fraudulent and all that, obviously. But like again, like he was pretty fucking balls out about it though. Like he didn't even claim that he was a democracy at a certain point. So like I don't know, man.
So were the Nazis not fascist when they were winning like 35% of votes in the Reichstag?
Well, no, they were in ideology, but not in practice though yet.
Oh, okay.
Unless you actually have political power, then you can say that a country is effectively fascist though. I mean, we have all kinds of neo Nazis and fascists and stuff in all these Western European countries, but they don't really have political power, so you couldn't call a country fascist. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Like, I'm sure there's even more fascistic elements in Russia that would like to take power, but yeah, whether or not they will either, like I don't know.
Okay.
Uh,
Um, yeah, if I think I have to jump off stream quite soon, but if there's
okay.
anything, is there anything else or?
Yeah, no, not really. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, well, it was nice chatting to you. If you have anything else you want to argue about or whatever, you can let me know, okay?
Yeah, sure. No, I enjoyed it actually. I think this was a better discussion than the panel was.
Yeah, well,
So,
panels.
I didn't yeah, I didn't really I don't know, man. I don't know if I enjoy like large panels that much. I just get kind of triggered and like and just have like emotional responses to just a bunch of dumb shit that I hear in the crosstalk. It's just I don't know. I mean, honestly, I probably just need to get better at it too. Like that was honestly my highest profile debate I've ever done, and I was kind of like nervous about it because I have done previous debates with like other people like Wick and Prime Kai's like, but there was much smaller people. You know, I never been in a debate with someone as big as Dylan Burns or Brianna Wu. So I don't know. I think I just need to get better at them too. Honestly, it wasn't my greatest showing, but yeah. So yeah, no, but I enjoy this discussion. Yeah, we should do it again sometime, man.
Okay. All good, man.
Yeah, yeah. Have a good one.
All right, take
See
care.
you.
Bye bye. I feel like there's always people telling me how patient I am. It's like, what am I supposed to do when he's talking like that? Just be like, oh, you fucking ass. Like, what do you want me to do? Oh, God. Say slurs. Yeah. Okay. Um, I am going to have a phone call with someone. I don't know. Oh God. I feel so done with like the tanky shit or the, not tank, but like the Marxist foreign policy.